Japan unveiled a new national security strategy today, along with details of its biggest military build-up since World War II.
Now, Japan has unveiled plans for its biggest military build-up since World War II. The government says it will double defense spending, bringing it up to the NATO standard of 2% of GDP.
Japan is arming itself at an unprecedented rate. Concerns about North Korea's missile development and China's military expansion have driven the sharp increase in defense spending as Japan moves away from its post-World War II pacifist constitution and takes a more robust approach to defense. Still called a self-defense force, the military is now focusing on the early detection of incoming threats and its ability to stop them long before they reach Japanese shores.
Tensions have already been escalated very much by China daily. It's a daily phenomenon that China is conducting very much coercive action around Japanese territorial waters.
Japan has approved its biggest military buildup since the Second World War, warning that China poses the greatest strategic challenge ever, and outlining plans to develop a counter-strike capability funded by record defense spending. The plans, announced by the government on Friday, reflect growing alarm over a more assertive Chinese military and a North Korean regime that continues to improve its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities. But the changes have also triggered criticism that Japan is abandoning more than 7 decades of pacifism under its post-war constitution. Japan aims to double defense spending to 2% of gross domestic product (GDP) over the next 5 years, in a departure from its post-war commitment to keep spending at 1% of GDP. The increase would bring it into line with NATO countries and make it the world's third biggest spender on defense, after the US and China. Under the changes, outlined in 3 documents, Japan will also acquire new weapons that can strike enemy targets 1,000 kilometers away with land or sea-launched missiles, a move some believe violates its war-renouncing constitution.
I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
Article 9 of the Constitution, drawn up by U.S. occupation forces after the Second World War, renounces war and forbids Japan from using force to settle international disputes. Its military, known as the Self-Defense Forces, is limited to a strictly defensive role. But critics say that has left Japan ill-equipped to respond to present-day security threats posed by China and North Korea. While Japanese voters have traditionally been skeptical about direct revision of the constitution, public support for a more robust military has grown since the Ukraine war, and amid fears that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan could pose a threat to Japan's security. One of the documents, the National Security Strategy, said Japan faced the severest and most complicated national security environment since the end of the war, and singled out China as the greatest strategic challenge ever to securing the peace and stability of Japan, as well as a serious concern for Japan and the international community.
The United States has the largest ever military footprint solely in Japan. So without Japan, the United States could achieve very little when it comes to its engagement in the Indo-Pacific area. Japan's chosen to be a force multiplier in that sense by bringing itself closer not only to the United States but also to Australia and India and UK, France and Germany are also joining forces for that matter.
The U.S. ambassador in Tokyo, Rahm Emanuel, welcomed the strategies as a momentous milestone for U.S.-Japan relations and for making a free and open Indo-Pacific an achievable reality. Debate has also swirled around plans to allow Japan's self-defense forces to carry out counterstrikes against enemy bases overseas, a capability some have said is essential to counter the potential threat posed by North Korean missiles. Japan's government has renamed what is known as a preemptive strike to counter-strike capability, apparently to emphasize that it would be used strictly in self-defense when the country is confronted with signs of an imminent attack. Despite the government consensus on the nature and severity of threats to Japan's security, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party is divided on how the increase in defense spending should be financed. The Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, has opposed calls to use government bonds to help pay for the defense outlay, estimated at $320 billion over the next 5 years, opting instead to gamble on tax rises that his party and its junior coalition partner, Komeito, endorsed on Friday. But the tax increases could prove unpopular. In a poll conducted last month by Fuji TV, 66% of respondents opposed higher taxes to pay for a bigger military. Money will be spent on upgrading Japan's missile defense and buying up to 500 US-made Tomahawk missiles. It would eventually deploy more than 1,000 long-range cruise missiles, able to reach North Korea or coastal areas of China.
Unfortunately, in the vicinity of our country, there are countries carrying out activities such as enhancement of nuclear capability, a rapid military build-up, and unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force. These are now becoming more outstanding.
Japan is an immediate neighbor to Russia, North Korea, and China. That's not something that you could envy.
Instead of calling China's growing military assertiveness a direct threat to Japan, the policy documents have characterized military activities by China as a serious concern and a major strategic challenge to Japan and the international community.
Japan is also expected to strengthen its military presence in its southernmost islands, tripling the number of military units and equipping them with the ability to intercept ballistic missiles, according to media reports. The more forceful tone in the national security strategy is expected to anger China. The document, revised for the first time in almost a decade, identifies Beijing as a regional security threat and no longer states that Japan is seeking a mutually beneficial strategic partnership with China. This week, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin urged Japan to act upon the political consensus that the two countries are cooperative partners and do not pose a threat to each other. Hyping up the China threat to find an excuse for its military buildup is doomed to fail, Wang said. The self-defense forces will be reorganized, with the Army, Navy and Air Force placed under a joint command to respond more quickly to emergencies.